Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Carolyn Hester is an American folk singer and songwriter. She was a part of the early 60s folk music revival, in particular the Greenwich Village scene. Carolyn's first album in 1957 was produced by Norman Petty, who most will associate with Buddy Holly's work. Named the Texas Songbird, Ms. Hester was active politically, even leading the boycott of the TV program Hootenanny after Pete Seeger was blacklisted from appearing on it. Carolyn was signed to Columbia Records in 1960, and a year later asked a young Bob Dylan to play on her third album. It was Dylan's first studio session work. After a brief marriage to fellow folk singer Richard Farina, she collaborated with Bill Lee and Bruce Langhorne for a while, and in the late 60s formed the Carolyn Hester Coalition. In 1969, she married pianist, producer, songwriter David Blume, a union which lasted until his death in 2006. In more recent times, Carolyn has performed and toured with her two daughters, Amy Blume and Karla Blume. And in 2010, the trio recorded an album, We Dream Forever. Well, welcome, Carolyn. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you so much. It's really good to be here and to talk to my native Texas today.
Right. It's rare that I do get someone else from Texas. I think I've had a couple of others, but with talking to people from the UK and other countries, it's sometimes it's
yeah, I saw those faces, and they were all happy to be there. So, okay, that's for me. I'm going in.
Well, good deal. I'm glad you checked out some of those. Well, take us back, Carolyn, to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Waco, and my folks were. My mom was 20 years old. My dad was 23, and they'd both gone to, they met at college at what was called, I guess, San Marcos State Teachers College in that time. And it was a famous little school because Lyndon Johnson had gone there, graduated, and had gone on to Washington already. And so that kind of played a part in our lives because I think I was about 2.5 or 3. My dad, who had sort of a photographic memory, I think you'd say, he had passed law exams to enter university and got accepted at Georgetown University in DC. So I remember being on the train with them and going, that's a young memory. People don't remember age 3 much, but that was so amazing to be on a train, And so my parents wrote a letter to the congressional offices, because if Texans showed up, well, they would encourage you to, come on by, let us meet you. Why are you here from Texas? What can we do for you? I don't know if they do things like that now, but they did back then. So my dad was able to get a day job at the Navy Yard, they call it, and maybe they still call it that. And my mom got a job at the Social Security Administration, just starting out, but that was partly because we had a neighbor who was able to introduce us to her brother who worked for Social Security. So it's like when you look back, at that kind of thing, you say, this was all meant to be. That's kind of strange that there we were in the middle of Texas, just they were going to be school teachers, we had a quiet life, but no, we had all this going on. And then when the war started, well, then my dad studies at Georgetown, and the fact that at this point he had 2 children and was married, that didn't mean a thing because we needed every able person, So that began our travels and sort of like my travels. Because I look back now that when I was 18 and went to New York, and I started going to folk places around the USA, I had already been to some of those places, as far as I felt like I wasn't scared to go by myself. I had my guitar and I was okay. At any rate, we started out, he got into officers training school it was done at Harvard Yard. So, and then of course, initially, folk music was a big deal at Harvard Yard. And there I was, and so and then he got sent to San Francisco for some training. Then he got sent down to San Diego for some more training. We traveled with him. We had gotten a house in DC, but we sold that and then just went on the road with him as far as we could go. And then he had to ship out of San Diego. And I remember even that I was maybe 5 then, and my brother was baby brother. They let my brother and I go on the ship before it sailed. They let us go on and see the ship, but they wouldn't let my mother. She was a grown up and she might be a spy. And so, I can even remember what that looked like. At any rate, then my mom and brother and I came back to Texas, and I was in Texas until my dad was discharged. And then we went back to the DC area and actually settled for a while in Virginia, military housing, kind of thing. And so that's the way it evolved. And then finally, when I was about 12, I think we left the DC area and we went back to Texas. And my mom, in the meantime, had kept on working at the Social Security Administration, except for during the wartime, she worked nights at the Bureau of Engraving where she printed $10 bills. I mean, we were all in when the war, made us all different, made us all. So back in Texas, my mother worked again for Social Security and my father worked for the VA because with a law degree, and all that, he could be an adjudicator and determine if a military person was going to get how much they were going to get from the GI Bill and those kind of things. So then, in Texas, things began because I really contribute Texas as being mightily important in my interest in music, because at that time they had more music programs than they do now, and then TV was a little bit of a new thing. In '54, I think we got our first TV set, and I had started singing in the 7th grade. They had a talent show, so I sang at that. And a teacher came up to me the next day and she said, "Carolyn, you don't know me. I'm the PE teacher here. You're in 7th grade. You don't have PE this year." But she said, "I liked your song yesterday." And she said, "I wonder, have you ever heard of a gal named Susan Reed?" And I said, "No." I said, "Is she a singer?" And she said, "Yes, she's a singer." She said, "I have a record of hers. Do you have a record player?" And I said, "Yeah, we do." And so she brought me an LP of Susan Reed. And that was the first time I heard a woman, besides Burl Ives, right?
Yeah.
As a woman singing folk songs, and she could play the zither. And it was just wonderful. In fact, there's one song on there, "If I Had a Ribbon Bow," it's called. And it was on her record, and I recorded it then when I made my first album. I said, "Okay, this is in my soul, this song, Susan Reed." So at any rate, it was hard for me to let that album go and to go back to the teacher with it. And that was the first test, Then I had a friend, Carolyn Smith, who played piano. So she and I got invited to be on TV, and in Dallas at that time, Howdy Doody was starting out. So there we were in a studio across from Howdy Doody. They're filming that, and then we're over to, and another time when I played there, somebody, I sang something, I forget the name of it, but it had, they made a windmill in the studio for me so that it would be going while I was singing about the Snyder Z, you know. So, so there, you know, that's Dallas letting its talent, letting its musicians, you know, they're kids even, they'll let everybody come in and try out this new medium. So that had a big impact on me. Oh, people don't mind it if I pick up the guitar, and you know, and see, and I was just in love with the folk songs. And then when I had been around 10, I heard Irene Goodnight, Huddie Ledbetter wrote it, and I mean, he'd been in prison in Texas, but he's a Texan, you know. And he was a Dallasite, I think. So it just struck me so that became a big fan of Pete Seeger, and uh, so when I turned 18, by this time, because of the government jobs, we all got transferred out of Dallas to Denver, and that only lasted 2 or 3 years. Then they sort of decided to decentralize those, and they all came back to Texas. In the meantime, I had turned 18, had been on some TV shows, teen music in Colorado, even in Denver, and so I kept on this encouragement I had. So at 18, I decided if I'd have still been in Texas, I think I would have gone to UT in Austin with some of my high school graduates in Dallas, but I wasn't there with them, and so I said, I really want to go find Pete Seeger. I said, that's what I really want to see if I can sing every day, you know, if that can be my life. And so my folks, you know, they had faith in me as a singer, but my mom says, I need you to be somewhere every day that I know where you are. For instance, she said, I heard about the American Theater Wing, and so we could put you there, and they have some music classes and so on, and acting and all. So let's do that. So one of my friends in high school in Denver, she wanted to be a dancer, so she and I went to New York. So see, there's another thing. How about that for a coincidence, you know? So so at 18, I landed in New York, went to American Theater Wing, found several music teachers I really liked. I started getting booked, and at the same time, I started working in New York City offices. I worked, my goodness, I worked at the UN. I worked for the Revlon makeup. You know, I worked for the Saturday Review of Literature. I worked there on and off 6 months. Their receptionist had gotten a medical problem, and so there I was. At any rate, I went home for Christmas at one time when my folks were still in Colorado. No, they had moved, I'm sorry, they were not in Colorado then. They had landed in Lubbock. That's what it was. So my mom heard on the radio a group called the Roses. And so they were talking about Norman Petty, who had a studio actually 100 miles, I think it was, from Lubbock in Clovis, New Mexico. And so my mother said, well, what about this Norman Petty? Who is he? She had called the radio station where she heard the Roses, and they got on the phone with her. See, another coincidence. Why? How could that happen? You know. So then they said, well, Norman Petty is interested in all kind of talent. And she said, well, my daughter has already gone to New York, but she says, I'm anxious for her to record around here. And her thought being that if I recorded locally and got some interest, you know, and started having concerts of my own, there in Texas and so on. Well, maybe I'd stay in Texas a while. Well, it all backfired. When I went and auditioned. She and I drove over to Clovis and learned my guitar. And I sang for Norman and I think his wife and then his secretary, a lady named Norma Jean Berry. And so, Norman said, well, I like your voice. I like what you do. But he says, I don't know anything about folk music. Do you think you'd have enough songs to make an album? And of course, I said yes, but so anyway, so we decided on recording dates, and he had a guy who could play bass, so he had hired the guy to do that, and I went home and I learned "You Banks and Braes of Bonnie Doon" to add to that. You could hear that, and so all that worked out well. One of the first days when I was going to record, I was waiting to go in the studio, and Norman Petty would record at night. You may know all this, I don't know, but his father owned a car repair shop on that same property, and the father would be through with the gas station and the repair shop around 6 o'clock, and so an artist would show up, and Norman and I would feed them. They even might drive some nice place around town or something. I learned all the places, and then at nightfall, well, he would start recording. He had echo chambers built into that garage where his dad did the repairs. So that was the hang up. He couldn't record people while the repairs were going on. So at any rate, this is how it was. So after the recording sessions, well, then we would just, like if it was 3 in.the morning, well, we would just, he had some cots and we would just flake out for a few hours until we drive back to, Lubbock or whatever. And at one point, I'm waiting with Vi, and she has me come into the living room of their home. They're the other side of the recording studio. And I'm sitting there with her. I'm sitting in front of the fireplace, and I've got my guitar up, and in walks this tall drink of water with the horn-rimmed glasses, and I just fell over, And so he started taking pictures of me.
Really?
And Vi says, Carolyn, meet Buddy Holly. I said, oh yeah, I know all about Buddy Holly. Well, one thing led to another. I ended up getting to go back to New York. My record came out. Buddy and the Crickets came and played at the Brooklyn Paramount. And so Vi swore that she had pictures of Buddy and me holding hands and leaving the subway station, and walking into the theater. In the theater was Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, the Everleys. I mean, wow. It was absolutely stunning. And so all of this was going on. In the meantime, the folk thing was heating up, and I had started out playing like supper clubs. People would know about the Kingston Trio and all that, and of course Burl Ives and Harry Belafonte, and so
really? Sorry, let me stop you real quick. I wanted to tell us a little bit about Buddy Holly. What kind of guy he was, what his personality.
Buddy was so talented. The talent just spewed out of him. When he probably accidentally got booked at the Apollo Theater uptown, and they have like a soul audience up there, and he went over like gangbusters. They were dancing in the aisles, to do stuff, So, and to me, at the Brooklyn Paramount, when that spotlight hit the Crickets, well, there was joy, and his body language was so important. he didn't try to dance. He didn't put anything on. It was just that his whole body moved with everything he played. It was a thrill every time I got to see them work, and I got to meet the Everleys through him, and all the people that I really respected and admired in the music business.
What's interesting about that is how influential they were across the pond over in the UK. Artists like that.
That's right. And after one of those trips, when they had taken Buddy over for the concerts, they showed me a photograph that had been taken by a British newspaper, and it shows a train, and it shows some kids standing on a hillside beside the train, and they had a big sign that they had done by hand in big letters, "Buddy Holly is great."
Wow. I'd like to see this picture. I would laugh.
Yeah. Isn't that just wonderful? So back in New York, then the folk thing was really taken off, and so because I had an album, I got a call from a club that was just opening called Folk City. It was called Gertie's Bar, and it was across the street from NYU. The club owner had seen me sing probably at the Gaslight, another place in the village. So he said to me, he said, "I'm glad you brought your guitar tonight. Would you do a few songs for us?" So I did. And so he and his brother was named John. So this was Mike Porco. Mike wanted to start a folk night. He'd had a few folk singers up. He was going to start a Hootenanny night where you could show up and sign up and get up and sing. That would be like on a Sunday or a Monday night. And he said, there are other folk singers in town here. He says, like there's a couple of folk labels here and all that. He says, but all those people are older than you are. He says, I think that you, with your record, we can get you played probably by Oscar Brand on New York radio. And he says, I think the kids from NYU across the street would come over and see you. And so that's what happened. And it was really, in other words, what my point is, I might not be the greatest folk singer around, but the timing, again, I'm pointing out to you. Right. It's crazy, there I was, and it was Buddy Holly. His success led to me having a release, and there I,
everything happened for a reason, like you said. Everything happened for a reason.
It was, yeah, and I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know what was going to happen next, and so then I recorded. Let's see. So my first album we call Scarlet Ribbons, and then I realized, well, this whole folk thing that Mike Porco was pointing out in the village, maybe I should make a record for one of them. So Tradition Records, that was owned by the Clancy brothers, and they asked me to make a record. So I made a record with them. And then Columbia came calling. And so about that time, I had married Richard Farina. And so we were married 2 years, and we didn't really get along as well as we expected. So that didn't last. So I was married to him for 2 years. So then at Columbia, the deal was that Pete Seeger got signed. And so when that happened, they all started looking around and saying, well, people like myself were drawing crowds in Greenwich Village. And so they got the Brothers Four and myself and a whole group of people. And so one night, I'm waiting for my recording dates to come up. And I think this was in July, or maybe it was July or August of 61. And the recordings were going to be in September. So one night I'm doing like 3 sets in the night. Yeah, I was getting a little tired out and I was running out of songs. So I said, well, here's a song by a fellow I know. I said, it isn't a folk song, but I hope you don't mind if I do it. It's by Buddy Holly, Lonesome Tears. So I did this thing. Some strange young guy pulls his chair up to the stage beside me. He's still sitting on the chair, and he's getting the chair. And he sort of stops everything. And there's only a few people still in the club. And he starts saying, "Did you really know Buddy Holly?" You know. I said, "Yeah." And I said, "As unfortunately, I got invited to his last recording session too." And so it doesn't matter anymore. That's not really true. It still matters a lot, you know. He and I were commiserating. So I said, well, I just have a few more songs, and so I'm trying to. So okay, I'm finishing the set. Go back to the kitchen where you always packed and unpacked your guitar, and so he came following me in there, and he says, well, you know, I just love Buddy Holly and I like what you do. And he says, so where are you singing next? And I says, well, in Boston, actually, it's going to be my last gig for a while. He says, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm going to make an album. So, you know, that's next. And he said, well, he says, I'm Bob Dylan. And he says, so I could play guitar for you sometime or something. I said, oh, God, that'd be nice. Anyway, so what happens, unbeknownst to me, about a month later, Bob hitchhikes to Boston, where I am, and I'm sitting there waiting to go on. And Bob Dylan shows up and he goes on and does the set. and then I do my set and all that. Then he announces, I hitchhiked up here. He says, I just wanted to see you again. So I says, well, we're not leaving town until tomorrow. He says, well, I'm staying with Eric Von Schmidt. I says, oh, he's a good friend. And he says, well, maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I says, oh, maybe. Well, okay. So Eric Von Schmidt's calling us and says, Bobby's here and he wants to go to the beach. We're going to go to Riviera Beach. So I said, well, okay. So so Richard is with me. And so we go to Riviera Beach and sitting there in the sand. Well, I didn't go into the water and neither did Bobby. And I noticed this guy is pale. He only goes to nightclubs and plays. You know, it's unbelievable. And of course, he always wore these different hats, you know, the odd kind of caps. And I said, you know, it strikes me as being different, you know. And so he starts talking to me. He says, you know, I could open some shows for you again, like I did last night. Because so now he's he's building up a track record with me. This guy, right. I had no control, you know. And so I said, when I'm making a record, and I said, and I thought, well, he's probably going to be interested in that. But I said, I have that wonderful guitar player, Bruce Langhorne. I said, I have that great bass player, Bill Lee, who I have not played with, but he's been on an Odetta record. And I said, I just know it's going to be something, you know. And he says, oh my gosh. And so in his set, I noticed he'd been playing harmonica. I said, you know what? On my first album, my dad played harmonica on Wreck of the Old 97 for me. I said, so how about that? Would you play your harmonica for me on the record? He says, here's my phone number. I'll be there. So I said, well, now, wait a minute. It's going to take some rehearsal, you know, because it's John Hammond. He's looking for folk singers and we don't want to disappoint him, you know. And he says, oh, that sounds wonderful, you know. So So that's what happened. So John Hammond indeed says, well, I know what you sound like and you're singing all over the place and all that. He said, but he says, I don't know what your band sounds like. Okay, can you believe that I had Bob Dylan in my band? I mean, so, so, so we're sitting at this table, this picnic table, in the kitchen of some people in the village who I didn't know, but Richard knew, and they had gone to Europe, I think, and for a couple of weeks. So we got to stay in his apartment. That's where we were in life. We were living with anybody who had a stray bed, you know. I didn't have a book, a bedroll back then. If that's what I needed.
Right.
So they so John Hammond came to the village to this apartment where we were on 10th Street, and on this picnic table they had in the kitchen. I was sitting across from Bob, and sitting next to Bob is John Hammond, and sitting across from John Hammond is Bruce Langhorne. He's sitting next to me, and then standing at the end of the table with a stand-up bass is Bill Lee. Of course, he turns out to be Spike Lee's father. I mean, this was whoa,
Wow.
yeah, really amazing. And so John Hammond looked very pleased, and he couldn't take his eyes off Bob. It sparked everything. So it ended up that we were just going to use Bob on 3 songs. And during a rehearsal, I was sort of not sure what the 3rd song was going to be, but Bob started singing "Come Back, Baby," and so that meant that with all the other songs that I was doing and how I treasure doing every song, have a different kind of song every track if I can. This appealed to me, but it was a blues song. I don't think I'm a blues singer. Anyway, I tried, Anyway, but it sounds really good because Bruce Langhorne played the heck out of that. Bill Lee was all over it, and Dylan just went nuts. He was, played great. And the album itself is just called Carolyn Hester. It's on Columbia. And so the proof of the pudding was that when everybody left long playing records and went to CDs, they took me with them. Okay, that's what I can do.
Right. Well, so let me ask you this. So everybody was impressed with Bob Dylan from the get-go, right? I mean, they saw the potential.
They did.
Yeah.
They did, but they had problems for a year. It really late after Dylan's first album came out, it was in limbo about whether they were going to keep him or not, because certain people were fighting John Hammond over this and saying, "Oh, Hammond's folly" and all that. Well, just wait. So Dylan had Al Grossman for manager, and he helped me get on at Columbia because he knew that he was the one who knew Hammond was looking for folk singers. So he called Charlie Rothschild, who was managing me at the time, and said, "I'll meet you up at Columbia. You gotta get Carolyn." I was down in Virginia at that time. He said, "Get Carolyn up here tomorrow, and we're going to go see John Hammond." And so I sang just with my guitar for John Hammond in his office. And that's how but because I mean, the evidence was already there. I mean, I was, and he had been trying to get Joan Baez, and she didn't trust him or something. It was interesting. But at any rate,
let me ask you this. This may be going back a little bit. Who dubbed you the Texas Songbird?
Okay, that was because I had the great fortune to play in England myself a lot. And one of the albums that was put out was called Texas Songbird, and it has one of my albums, Music Medicine, and another one that put a duo thing. So I got very lucky there. The TV people would have me come on. There was a Sunday night show that was a big deal, and I got to be with Johnny Mathis and all kinds of people on that show. So I was really pleased there. I have I have some albums here I can just show you.
Sure. Visuals are
So,
always, yeah. You know,
well,
I have one of your, I have to tell you, I have one of your town hall recordings on CD.
do you,
Which
okay.
one yeah, but I have one of those. I think
Well,
there's a couple, right?
well, here, so, but the town hall thing is kind of interesting because that was Norman and I getting back together again and him coming to New York. And so do you have this one? Or is it this one?
Let
See,
me,
there's town hall 1 and 2.
there was two. I believe it's the, oh, it may be number one. It may be.
Let's
I'm
see.
gonna check. I'm gonna check real quick too. Just I should have already had this up.
Okay, well, there's another thing like this that came out in England where they just put things from both of those records together. See, so that's English, if that's it. So this is from Town Hall, recordings from Town Hall, and then these two came out in America.
I'm gonna get that, pull that up in a second if I can here. But yeah, the cover looks. I remember the cover looks different. It may be another.
Well, maybe see, could be a reissue that I don't even know about.
It could be a reissue. It could be that too.
My whole life is a surprise to me.
It's a surprise, right? A constant surprise. That's fine. So basically, it just came from that album.
The Texas Songbird, yeah. So that was a guy named John Tobler who he had Road Goes On Forever Records, and they prided themselves in being a reissue company. So they had put 2 albums together and reissued them, and they called it Texas Songbird. Let me see. Okay, so another thing involving England. This was years later, and this is, well, here's an album that came out in England only about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's on Jasmine Records, and it's a CD, and you can see up there. Look at that, Bob Dylan.
Oh, that would be, yes. That
And
would
then
be nice. Jasmine releases a lot of good material. They do. That's
well,
a
and
good.
they're ahead of us because in this country a record has to be about 60 years old before you as an artist can put it out yourself or something. Whereas in their country, it has to be 50 years old. So these albums had come out in England, and so those guys just turned around and brought it out. So that first one,
Yeah.
excuse me a second. Okay, so this was my first album. That was my second album on Tradition for the Clancys, and then my third album, that was let's see, the cover of the
I have your second. I have your second album, I believe, the one that has When Jesus Lived in Galilee and Yarrow, and Once I Had a Sweetheart.
Oh, okay, but that's this one. That's the Columbia one. It was my third recording, but my first one on Columbia.
That
and
one.
Those songs you mentioned.
That one, and then that's what it is. It's a German Bear family, a town hall Bear family, and it must be all of them together because it's like 20 something tracks.
And I think they called that Dear Companion.
Yeah.
At least that's one version of it. And they have a picture of me and Dylan playing harmonica from the back. You can see it's him, and then I'm sitting on it.
So I have it's the compilation on Bear family. Okay. I'm found now. I'm found.
but I mean, it's just. And then I suppose the biggest surprise of all, or one of the biggest surprises of all, was when so this happened to me, that I was on the Saturday Evening Post.
Yeah.
And that was in 1964. And unfortunately, very sadly, JFK had been assassinated. And so they were doing this coverage on folk. And they told me, because of the president's death, they could use him. It's because his birthday is May the 30th or something. And so they said, this is going to come out on his birthday, they may not use your cover like we hope. But and then I said, well, besides that, they might put Jackie Kennedy on the cover, so I really didn't think, but then it ended up that I was like, see, so one after the other. I get the papers just thinking.
I was going to say that. What a reaction! What kind of reaction did you have when you saw that, or when you found out?
Well, my phone started ringing,
Yeah.
and I had to go to Chicago to play at the University of Chicago the next night. And so on our way over to the campus, a friend drove me over, and we stopped at a shop. I had to have some cough drops, so I had a sore throat from all my excitement. And so we go in there, and there's the post cover. A stack of the post is on the floor, and and so that it really hit me, And at any rate, it was really wonderful, and I was happy for folk music. You know what I mean? And later, years later, Peter, Paul, and Mary, there was an article about them in the magazine more than anybody else. I mean, I had a quote in the magazine, uh, and they had a picture of Judy Collins in the magazine, and then Peter, Paul, and Mary. Peter apparently had gotten very upset about this. And one night, Al Grossman called me up and said, so listen, we haven't hung around enough. He said, why don't you, if you're, I'm going to go out to dinner tonight and meet some friends, and we might meet up with Peter, Paul, and Mary something later. Would you like to go? And I said, oh, sure. I didn't understand this treatment, nice treatment. So, but anyway, so we went out to eat, and went to Bob's apartment.
Really?
We were going to see Peter Blume. We saw Bob. So what I noticed there was that he was playing Irish music. He had an LP player, and all that, and he had lots of the beautiful melodies and all that. So that inspired him so much. And so I loved that memory of that night, but it wasn't over. I was in a setup. They had set me up. Al took me into a bar, and I had Richard, when I was married to Richard, we would go in bars because he drank and I didn't drink. And so it was always, an orange juice, please. So here we are in this other bar. Peter Yarrow is there, and Peter Yarrow wanted to take my hide. He was so mad about Peter. Wow. I agree with you. There was an article about you guys in there. You deserve that cover. Peter and I were buddies ever after that.
After that. Well, backtrack a little bit. Before it was Peter, Paul, and Mary, Peter and Paul, they wanted to, or I don't know who was behind this. Was it the two of them? They wanted you to join before Mary.
Well, actually, this was before Peter and Paul and Mary that Al had the idea of such a group. And so he had Bob Gibson, who he booked all the time anyway. So he bought Bob Gibson, and then he thought to have me, and then he thought to have another guy named Ray Boguslav, who was also a wonderful performer. I think maybe he played guitar, and Gibson played banjo.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I play guitar, but Mary never played an instrument, I don't think, anyway, in the end. But so what happened there was, see, I already had 2 albums out, and I really, I knew Ray Boguslav a bit and liked him. Bob Gibson I didn't know too well, and I was a little bit afraid of him. I just thought, I'm not sure this would go smoothly. But I said, I've already got 2 albums out. I need to stay doing what I'm doing. I think it was worthwhile to not do that. So that's why that didn't happen with me and the the mix.
Okay.
So Peter, Paul, and Mary was a whole different thing, and wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I think the
what-
main thing was that we were hoping to change the world. You know what I mean? And so we, all had that in mind. It looks like to me. And I think that now my ambition would be to keep singing the 60s songs to people, and we do. I sing some things I write, and I sing some 60s songs, and I believe people love them very much. And I just want to stress that everybody should keep up with their dreams, keep on putting it out there, because I had no idea all this would have happened. I just really wanted to sing those songs. I wanted to play those chords. I wanted to hear those melodies. And in the meantime, on the way, I got to be part of Bob Dylan's story and Nancy Griffith's story, and and Peter, Paul, and Mary's story, and just all these fantastic things happened, and I could never anticipate. Just keep on with your dream, and believe, and pray.
right.
And you never know where something that you said or an idea you dropped along the way, if it doesn't light up your life, it might light up somebody else's life. Right?
Stick to your guns, right? What in those early heady days, do you remember any special shows with other artists, musicians?
Well, I remember all of it, I'm sure, and I'm grateful for all of it. And I loved helping start Kerrville Folk Festival with Rod Kennedy, and I only played Newport in Boston, in Newport, Rhode Island. That festival was huge. I only played it once, but I played probably 30 of the Kerrville festival ones, but main thing was the first one. That was LBJ came to see us. It was amazing. So I think that feeling of making a mark, having putting your weight where you really believe, that was important. I got to know Ravi Shankar, great sitar player, and he wrote a song for me, and I got to record it at Columbia. And the only place you can get it is, probably maybe on YouTube, somebody has put it up, but on the German collection on Dear Companion, which costs a lot of money. So I don't love that. So if you just really want to hear Magire, Majhire, you could, what had happened was I had a second time at Columbia Records. I may be one of the only people John Hammond ever signed twice. Anyway, John Simon was my producer this time, and I told him, I says, well, as part of this album, we were doing a kind of an unusual, a little bit upgraded with, say, classical instruments here and there. So I said, Ravi Shankar had written a song for me. Would you be interested in that? And he said, oh, wow, would I? I says, well, I happen to know he's going to come to town next week to do some concerts. And I can let him know, and maybe he would help us or something like that. He says, oh, that would be just amazing. So that's what happened. I got in touch with Ravi, and he said he would come to the studio, and then he wrote, and I may still have this piece of paper where he wrote down what he wanted, a certain sitar player and this and that and other things. And so it ended up that we had banjo and sitar, and Ravi didn't play any of it. He just directed the traffic, but he gave me a tape of him singing the song. So which I wanted desperately to know how to correctly, years later, for Ravi Shankar's 90th birthday, Radio France put on a program celebrating Ravi's life, and they called me and had me send a message, and then I downloaded my gire on there for them, and they said that when they played it, everybody thought that I was Indian, and that was the greatest compliment in my life, I think. And I said, well, that's in the Pete Seeger tradition, that if you were going to envelop in your program from another country, well, be truthful and be honest and do your best to recreate it,
That raga, yeah. Yes, that sound. Well, what was the idea or the concept behind the Carolyn Hester Coalition?
I think it was because I was surrounded by friends at that time who were doing rock, and so they kind of got me interested in it. And of course, I had done lots of different kinds of music, and so it didn't really scare me to do it. And so some of it is some good folk rock that's in there. I did not enjoy the rock and roll road very much. The folk thing was more like your families. You go, there's a group of clubs or concert halls where they love you, and at each of those places you've got friends, and sometimes you go stay with them. And in other words, that was what I was kind of used to. But with rock, that was a little bit harder. But at any rate, if something magical had happened and they wanted to hear me sing Magic Man like crazy, well then I would be saying something different about that.
Right. Good.
But I guess they didn't want to hear me do magic.
I didn't want to hear that. Yeah, you're right. I think that the whole folk movement, was kind of more like communal. It was like,
That's right.
yeah, exactly. Everybody helping everybody, and it was a nice movement for sure. You didn't just revolutionize the world with change, but you did change it. You did.
Well, I think the proof is partly, I mean, one little clue to what you're saying is that when LBJ got that civil rights voting
Yeah.
act passed
Right.
in Congress, and it became the law of the land, he said, "We shall overcome." And I said, "Oh, that's it. That's it. That's my."
That's your motto. That's the slogan. There we go. That's right. That's right.
This is hysterical to me. But anyway, yeah, no, that's good. Because I was in Mississippi when they were doing voter registration, and it was scary, I wrote a song about,
You were right down there.
Warner and Cheney, so.
Wow. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about David? How you met?
Yes, my David.
Yes,
David
yes.
Blume, and I met in my apartment. A friend of mine met him, and she was a young folk singer. She so it was like a double date. So David and his friend came over and picked up Sandy and me, and Sandy Phelps, and so we went out and had sandwich or something like that. Well, the next day, Sandy calls me. She says, "Listen, that guy David, he called me up. He wanted to know all about you." And she says, "I don't know that much about you. Tell me about you." So at any rate, so then she and I went up to his place, and he was writing with Jerry Keller, and Jerry Keller had a magnificent career as a jingle singer. And so David and Jerry Keller wrote Turn Down Day, which was a big hit by the Circle. And then they were invited to write for some films. So they wrote songs. The Reluctant Astronaut. Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I think I do. Was that Don Knotts? Was that
Don Knotts. Yeah.
Yes.
And then they did another Don Knotts movie. And I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, you'll come to me tomorrow and I'll call you.
Okay, yeah, right.
86. She can't remember everything. Oh.
Let me just say this, you have a really good, vivid memory. What do you do to keep your mind active besides, working with your daughters and
Well, I like word puzzles.
okay.
Turns me on. I don't know what to tell you. No, but also there are some things on the market right now that kind of wake me up a little bit. So just in other words, in any drugstore, supplements, that uh, that are good for me, that help me, because it gets a little tough when it gets late at night anymore. In other words, I'm not so ready to get up and do that darn third set anymore.
Right. That's true. Because I do crosswords.
I'm not a good crossword puzzle.
A good crossword.
No, my mother was. See, she was a champ, so I stayed way away from that.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to compete with her. She was too good. So, yeah.
My mom has always been a good crossword puzzle. I guess that's where I get it from. But she played bridge too,
Oh,
I kind of kept her. So up until recently, she's had that good memory. She's starting to lose it a little bit, being 90 years old.
well, just take her to the drugstore and look at this.
Yeah, get some supplements for feed her full of supplements. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about Cafe Danza. Is that it,
Yes,
Danza?
okay, Cafe Danza. I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah.
For 30 years, David and I ran Cafe Danza, and we had gotten the club. We had moved from New York to LA because he got a job as a record producer for RCA Records, and he had a prize winner in Hugo Montenegro, who had, I don't know if you know his career, but he would record TV show. He would write themes for TV shows, Peter Gunn, and I mean, there's just different things that he would do. And then he had a great reputation for arrangements, and so the two of them got together and did 5 or 6 albums themselves. And so then about that time, he got offered a job at the LA Times, because also David had been an editor of Northeastern University's newspaper. So he had majored in journalism. So his life was music and journalism. It's amazing, and he did terrific things in both areas. And what was a great surprise to me, and I was so happy, was that after we met, well, then he would play all the concerts with me, and that's all I needed, he and I.
Yeah.
And it was just fabulous. How lucky could I have been to have somebody like him?
Your own husband, your collaborator. Yeah.
It was just wonderful. And and now he had been married before. He had 2 sons, so I have 2 fantastic stepsons. And then he and I had my 2 daughters, Karla and Amy. And then Karla and Amy and I made an album after he passed away. We made an album on our own, and we're doing other recordings now. But anyway, so now Amy has presented me with grandchildren. I've had step grandchildren from those 2 stepsons. I have 2 step granddaughters and 1 step grandson, and they are just the apple of my eye. But now Amy has had twins, and now I have twin granddaughters.
Yeah.
It's
When I
don't know.
first emailed emailed her, she was saying that she had just had, or maybe the second email to her, that she had had twins. And
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
wow, that's something.
We're kind of busy.
Yeah, and I can hear at least one of them in the background.
That's right. It may be two. They seem to sound alike. And boy, when they get together, they're going to be singers. They have a better range than I do.
I was going to say you're passing the genes on there for sure. Well,
But,
what a couple of other things, real quick. 2003. That must have been a very proud moment for you being awarded that Lifetime Achievement Award.
oh,
Uh,
that was wonderful. That was the World Folk Music Association. That was Dick Sari in Virginia and in Washington D.C. area. He would present concerts every year, raising money to run his Folk Music Association. And people like Bill and Taffy Danoff, Afternoon Delight, the people who had that hit, they were regulars there. And some of the Kingston Trio, they would come. That was lovely, but so many great people. Tom Paxton eventually moved down to. He left New York and moved to Washington D.C. area. I think he still lives there, and he helped with that organization a lot. And one of my albums is a tribute to Tom Paxton. I did all Tom Paxton songs. I did one album of all my songs called Warriors of the Rainbow. So, maybe it was a little scary sending your daughter out alone to be a folk singer, but it's been quite a joy. And it's been a joy meeting you and seeing interest in all this. Thank you so much.
right, right. Well, yeah, and then being able, getting to work with your own daughters, um, and then the album "We Dream Forever."
Thank
How
you.
did how did you? I bet you that was just a real joy working with them
It
on that
was,
album.
and that was about the time Sirius XM got started. We got airplay on 80 stations on the song Karla wrote that's called "We Dream Forever." That was amazing. Oh my gosh!
Well,
It's
are
all
you?
good.
Yeah, are you still performing and touring and all
Well,
that?
we're gonna. A fellow wrote a book uh, that came out last October. I've got a copy of it. If people can see this, it's
Oh,
called
yeah,
Music and Revolution,
yes.
and, and it's about the folk movement in Greenwich Village in the '60s. And so that has brought us back. The guy who wrote it is named Richard Farina, and he teaches this as a class. He's been teaching it for several years, but he finally got it in a book, and he writes beautifully. It was just super. And we're going to do a concert. We did one concert with him to introduce the book at the Museum of the City of New York um, last November. And so now this November, we're going to do a concert at one of the halls of Carnegie Hall. There are several halls in that great big building. But the seats are all sold out, 600 seats. And so he's going to have a whole lot of people. He's going to have Paxton and Eric Anderson and David Amram and Steve Earle and Jose Feliciano. And yeah, I'll be there too.
Yeah, I like Eric Anderson, his material. I think he was very underrated or has
Well,
been.
this is going to be about the 60s songs. It'll be all of it will be 60s songs. I mean, Paxton's going to do maybe Ramblin' Boy, but Steve Earle is going to do a Phil Oak song, things like that. So it's going to be all of us doing. And they are going to have me do "I'll Fly Away," which was it's got a lot of airplay these days because people want to hear the young Bob Dylan,
Yes, yes, yes. Well,
the very young Bob.
will your daughters be playing with you?
They're going to be playing with me.
All right.
We won't have a whole lot of time. Well, each one of us gets 2 songs. There's so many, and it's wonderful because it's a mini folk festival. It truly is, or a mini songwriters festival, if you will. You know,
Yeah. Wow.
it's folk music settings, but it's wonderful lyrics.
Yeah.
Contemporary.
That sounds really good, Carolyn. And I do appreciate you taking time out to do this and visit with me. Nice hearing all those stories. Oh, are you still in touch with Bob Dylan?
Just through his manager once in a while. Uh, I did get to sing at Carnegie. I mean, at what is it? The Madison Square Garden. It was concert. Nancy Griffith and I sang "Boots of Spanish Leather" for him, and that was lovely. He didn't need to invite me. You know, it was just another one of my surprises. That should be the name of my book if I ever write one. Surprise.
Yeah, show up, surprise.
Take care. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Keep up the good work. We sure appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that too. It's nice getting that kind of feedback. And it's interesting to get the comments. That's what I enjoy the most about these interviews and seeing that, you know, people, sometimes they come out of the woodwork, you know, you don't realize that the fans were younger or older or been around for that long. So it's really nice to get that. So, all right. Well, Carolyn, I will, I guess I'll send it to Amy. I'll send the link once I get it. It shouldn't be that much to edit. I don't think it's going to be that much.
Good.
But I'll send it to her. And then
That would be so wonderful to have.
and you can post it on your socials or
Okay.
what have
Amy says, okay.
you. She says, okay, go for it.
Okay. Go for
All
it.
right. All right. Well, thank you too, Amy, for hooking
Thanks.
up. And
Nice to meet you.
Take care. Bye.
all the best to you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.